In the last video, we laid out a to-do list of what we have to do to eventually get a list of campaigns on our screen. The first thing we're going to do is to create a new instance of Web3 that uses the provider that is given to us by MetaMask. We already went through this process once before, back on our lottery project. You'll recall that back on that project, we had imported Web3. We then used a provider to create a new instance, and then we exported it from that file we had created. We're going to do the exact same thing here inside this project. Recall that we had said that all of our Ethereum related code is going to be placed inside of our Ethereum directory. So I'm going to make a new file inside of here that we're going to use to create our new instance of Web3. I'm going to make a new file and I'll call it web3.js. Inside of here, we're going to write some code that is basically the same thing that we did back on the lottery project. At the top, we will import Web3 from Web3. We'll then use this constructor to create an instance of Web3. So we'll say Web3 is new Web3, and then we're going to give it the provider that is automatically provided to us by MetaMask inside the browser. And we could get access to that by referencing window.web3.currentProvider, like so. Then down at the bottom, we'll make sure that we export this new instance. So we'll say export default Web3. Now just a couple of quick reminders in here. As usual, make sure that the constructor function has capital W's and that the instance has lowercase w's. The other thing that I want to mention is that we're currently making a very big assumption in saying that we think that MetaMask has already injected a Web3 instance onto the page. Now that definitely might not actually be the case. Especially for this application, we want to make sure that in the future, people who are not using MetaMask should be able to use this application just as well. However, if other users who don't have MetaMask installed are trying to visit our application, Web3 will not be defined ahead of time, and that's going to definitely throw an error for us. We're going to come back a little bit later, and we're going to make some improvements to this file to handle the case in which a user without MetaMask tries to visit our application. But for right now, we'll keep things a little bit more simple and straightforward, and we're not going to worry about that just yet. All right, so let's now save this file. And the next thing we need to do is to tell Web3 that we have already deployed a copy of the CampaignFactory instance, or excuse me, the CampaignFactory contract. Let's be precise with our terminology here. So for this, we're going to create another separate file, and inside there, we will import Web3. We will then tell Web3 about that contract, and we will provide the address to it. In the same exact way that we now have a file that we can easily import to get access to Web3, the idea here is that by making a separate file that is going to house our factory contract, we can import that contract or that file into any other location inside of our project and instantly have access to a already deployed version of the factory. Now I'm using a lot of words right now that might not be making a lot of sense. So let's just write some code and see what this looks like. Inside my Ethereum directory, I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to call it factory.js. Inside of here, we're going to import the copy of Web3 that we just created. So we'll say import Web3 from ./Web3. Notice that we are using lowercase here because we are not accessing the Web3 library. We're not getting the constructor here. We're getting the instance that you and I just created. Then right underneath that, we're also going to import the compiled contract that is placed inside of our build directory. So remember, anytime that we want to tell Web3 about a already deployed contract, we have to give Web3 that contract's interface, or ABI. And the ABI is defined inside of the CampaignFactory.json file. So we will import CampaignFactory from ./build CampaignFactory.json, like so. Next, we're going to create our contract instance that refers to this specific address that we had already deployed the contract to, and we'll export it from this file. So like I said, if we ever need to get access to our deployed factory, all we're going to have to do is import factory.js. So we're going to say const contract. Actually, let's call it instance. Why not? Instance is new web3.eth.contract. Remember that the first argument to this is going to be our contract ABI, and that exists inside of our CampaignFactory variable right here, because this is the compiled contract that we had written to that JSON file. So as the first argument, we'll give json.parse CampaignFactory.interface. And then as the second argument, we need to provide the address that we already deployed our factory to. And we did that a couple of videos ago. You'll recall that we had saved that address inside the address file right here. So I'm going to go back over to this address file. I'm going to copy the address, and I'll paste it in here as our second argument, like so. And then finally at the bottom, we can say export default instance. Oops, instance. One more try. There we go. All right, so I feel like at this point in time, we are writing code that probably looks familiar, but it might be a little bit confusing exactly why we're placing some code inside the factory file and some code inside of Web3. Like I have said several times now, the entire idea here is that if we need to get access to our deployed factory instance from somewhere else inside of our application, we won't have to go through this entire process of importing Web3 and the interface and get the address and all this stuff. Instead, all we're going to have to do to get a handle on our instance is import this factory.js file. And poof, there we go. That's our pre-configured instance of our CampaignFactory. So this is really just about kind of setting ourselves up for making life easier as we start to work on more advanced features inside of our project. So now that we've got this instance easily accessible, we can use that instance to retrieve a list of all of our deployed campaigns and then show that list inside of our React component. So let's start taking care of that in the next video.